we are going to talk a little bit about um, how to enable your revenue team on the replicated platform using Salesforce. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. Where I sit in solutions engineering, I get to work with the people who are selling replicated. I get to work with the people who are building replicated, and I think a lot about how these things come together. So, um, in my last talk, I talked about the commercial software distribution lifecycle and enabling it with replicated, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that from Grant today as he talks about the distribution handbook. But um, one of the things I think about when I think about this process is that this is a great process for getting your software built, tested, released, all these different steps, and out there for your customers to use. But there are other business processes within our organizations. And sort of the question that this opens up when we think about the distribution life cycle is, what else is there? What's missing? Um, what are we doing that for? Well, of course, we're doing it to get that software into the hands of customers. Um, and so, I've always wanted to be able to show like a broader integration of the replicated platform. How do we bring it into other processes within our organization? How do we actually bring it to the people who go out and find those customers that we distribute to? So when I think about that, I think about the sales process and what the revenue team's doing, what sales folks are doing. Um, and their process, right? They go out, they find people to buy your software. They make sure that the customers are getting the right features for what they need, the right additions, the right add-ons, et cetera. They spend a lot of time forecasting and closing opportunities. They negotiate contracts, right? If you've ever bought anything or sold anything, you know what that process can be like. And then there's also someone who wants to make sure that that software is available. It's an interesting step in the process because that seems to tie back into what we were just talking about the distribution life cycle. Um, and so, much like the replicated platform is the platform for your product team and, excuse me, the platform for your engineering team and all those steps that you take to bring your software through that life cycle, there's a platform that these folks do for this cycle. It happens in Salesforce. Now, I know Salesforce isn't a monopoly. I know there's other folks that support this stuff. There's even some great open source out there like Sugar. Um, and there's a whole lot of other tools potentially that support the sales process. But one of the not so secret things about all those other tools is that they don't really get anywhere unless they integrate with Salesforce. So again, this keeps gnawing at me. How do I show, as I want to expand the replicated platform across the organization, how do I show that it comes together with this process? Because we have two very related sets of things going on here, right? We have what we're managing in Salesforce, and I have just a little picture of some of the main types of things we look at within Salesforce here, and a picture of what the replicated platform is all about, and some of the things we might have to do, external to both of them. Um, but these processes, when I start to think about what's going on, who is going to provision the customer and the license on the replicated platform, right? There's an interesting question. Is it going to be the people who sold the software, the people who built the software? Is it going to be the team that handles, making sure that the contract got signed, that who's going to do that? Um, how do we know that this account here in Salesforce is the same as this customer in the replicated platform, right? There's a lot of questions that start to come out about this. Does the license match the contract? So, if you've ever seen me do a demonstration, and I'm sure a lot of you have, there's the Slacker news application, and the Slacker news application is metered by users. How do we know that the number of users in this license here matches what the contract over here says? How do we get this welcome email sent? Right? It's going to have install instructions, maybe going to have the license attached. It's going to tell you how to download the embedded cluster, all those things. But how do we make sure that that gets to the right people and it contains the right information, the right credentials? Um, how do we keep, when we go back later to say, what license does is represented by this order in Salesforce, this contract that was signed? And how does someone who is working primarily in this Salesforce environment, how do they access all those things that you and I, as folks who are familiar with the replicated platform, can easily get to by logging into the vendor portal? The install instructions for Helm, the license file for doing a COTS install, the download and install instructions for an air-gapped embedded cluster. Um, all these things are a little bit disjointed, and you, as the software vendor shipping with replicated and distributing with replicated, you've got to figure out the answers to all of these questions. And to me, there's kind of one big answer here, and that answer is to bring Salesforce and replicated together. So a couple of months ago, I did an initial stab at doing this, and I kind of put together a quick integration of Salesforce and replicated that I walked through in a short video. And I wanted to expand it though, because it didn't answer all those questions from that previous step. Um, so what we're going to see today is sort of an enhanced and expanded version of that. We're going to walk through some of the things that are going on in Salesforce. We're going to see them reflected back on the replicated platform, and we're going to talk about what might come next. So um, I best terminology I could come up with here is that we're automating the fulfillment of your contract on the replicated platform. And Salesforce sort of becomes the engine to do this, right? Your customer has signed a contract, they've gotten it to your revenue team in some way, and they're doing some processes in Salesforce to make sure that it shows that, the contract has been signed and the order is ready to be delivered, and sort of all of those things happen. So what we're going to see today is we're going to see some automation running in Salesforce that, as we go through some steps in Salesforce, we're going to go over to the vendor portal. We're going to create the customer. We're going to save the account ID so that we know who that, excuse me, we know that that replicated customer matches the account in Salesforce. And we're going to pull over the install instructions and the license, those things that are generally available only in the replicated platform. We're going to attach them in that order. And then we're going to generate a welcome email. We're going to send it over to the customer. So thinking about that, right, we start to answer these questions, right? Who provisions the replicated and customers and license? Salesforce. How do we connect these two for like later analysis in our systems? We use the custom ID and the replicated customer. We save the Salesforce account ID there. So now we have these three things tied together. How do we know that the terms of the contract are reflected? Well, we're going to use the details from Salesforce to make sure we set up those license entitlements. Who receives the welcome email? What's contained in it? A Salesforce contact and the install instructions and potentially the license file. How do we track the link? We're going to have the license attached right there in Salesforce. And how can the revenue team go back and easily access all of these things? They're going to be right there in Salesforce. So let's take a look now at software. So I'm logged into Salesforce. Just a free developer account from Salesforce. I do recommend, listen, I'm going to show the repository for this code at the end of the presentation here today. The code is adaptable for your own Salesforce environment, but if you want to just go out and run the demo with the sample data and all that, you need one of these development accounts, because the way that I load and refresh this the sample data, you don't want that messing with your real business. So we're going to start with an opportunity in Salesforce. So this represents the fact that there's a conversation between your company and someone who wants to buy your software. And on here we have a product attached, right? It's Slacker News. It's the air-gapped long-term support edition. So we're going to click into there, and we're going to see there's a product here that represents that. And you can see on the product, I've got some things that are replicated related. I've got the application. That's the application ID for Slacker News in my vendor portal account. And we've got a channel that we want to be released from. In this case, this represents our LTS channel. I've created an additional channel for Salesforce for long-term support customers that we would release, similar to what Java does or Ubuntu does, right? We would release more slowly to a set of customers and commit to a longer term supportability. And then we've got entitlements here that are related to the replicated platform, right? Can they use COTS, the admin console? Can they use the embedded cluster, Kubernetes appliance? Can they use air gap installed, right? All these things that we need to be able to track on that license are part of this product that we're managing in Salesforce. So let me just do a couple of back buttons here over to that opportunity. I'm going to do some automation here that would not necessarily be part of your real process. I'm going to move this from the proposal price quote stage here to the negotiation and review stage. This is some automation I wrote. It actually happens to be the way we do it at Replicated, and some other places I worked do it, that at a certain stage, they just kind of create an order and then you go in and fill the order details in later. If you have to, add any more information. But some folks, that'll be a separate process. So I'm not a Salesforce expert. Your team will know how that's set up if they want to go and implement this. But you see, now we have an order. We go into the order, and attached to that is a contract. So we're going to follow through. You can see the product is still here. We go over to the contract. There'd probably be a file here that represented the actual contract that went over to DocuSign and all of that. But let's just assume that we've gone through all of that process, right? We don't have time here in my 30-minute demo for the weeks of going back and forth about the contract. So let's just say we're done and activate that contract. So the contract gets activated. I'm going to click through my customer here. You can see I've got a contact on here. It's got an email. They've got an email. Go to my opportunity again. You can see my order. You can see that contact is the technical buyer. So that's the person who's getting my welcome email. When I click back through to my order here, you can see I've got some attachments. I've got embedded cluster install instructions. I've got air gap install instructions because this is an air gap license. Everybody gets the Helm install instructions, and everybody who has that COTS or that admin console entitlement gets the admin console entitlement. And my browser won't show this in line, but I've got the license, the YAML file attached as well. So all of the things that folks need are attached here. I'm going to jump over to my email. Actually, let me just pull an email window over here onto this screen and show the welcome email with the instructions has come over to my account. So 1 second, because I have it dropping into another folder. Let me bring that folder up. Pull this window over here. Where'd it go? Sorry for this. I forgot that I had that full screen. You can see I have an email with air gap install instructions. I open it up. I have my instructions. Download the air gap bundle, download the air gap embedded cluster install, go through the process, and go through the install. So effectively, like, my welcome email is coming directly out of Salesforce. This was all tied in together. Now let's go back over to our browser and over to the vendor portal. You can see I go to my customers. Yep. All right, I'm going to have a list of customers here coming from the vendor portal. And I have my marker SIFT customer. I can click in and go over to the customer details. I did not have to come over here and do it. They're on my LTS channel. They have the license options that were attached to that product, and they have my default number of team members because I didn't add additional users in Salesforce. Had I wanted them to purchase additional users, that would have just been another product on that opportunity. You can see here, I have that listed as another line item that we add in there with another product. And then, and that is actually one of the only things right now that is sort of unique or sort of tied to the Slacker news implementation here. I wanted to generalize out those custom entitlements in my code, but I wasn't able to get that ready in time for today's demo. But that'll be something that I do as I continue to advance the the demonstration and the sample code related to it. So you'll be able to have, whatever custom license entitlements you have will be able to be products here, and you'll be able to make sure they get reflected correctly over into the replicated license. So, so you can see we did everything we needed to do. So now my customer can get my software, and all of it happened from this Salesforce interface, all enabled by the fact that the replicated platform has the vendor portal API that allows us to do that, and that Salesforce is an extensible tool that allows me to do development, to build my own process. It allows me to add those custom fields that you saw, right, where the product has certain attributes that are related to replicated, and it allows me to write code in triggers and classes, and that lets me, expand its capability. So I can trigger on these changes, execute code in another class that integrates to the replicated platform, and automate my process in that way. So let me jump back over here to my slides. So we can see that that's the process we just went through. So what do we do with this next? I mentioned just now I want to generalize out those license entitlements. Another aspect of it is how do we deal with trial licenses, right? When we're over there in that sales process, we've got multiple steps here before we go to actually closing. This is just the default process they use in the Salesforce development environment. So maybe somewhere here around value proposition, I'd want to create a trial. So I can sort of trigger on that change and generate out a trial license, install instructions for the trial, and then, continue to revise that license when it closes. Oh, I mentioned generalizing the license entitlements, and I want to make those instructions a little bit more flexible, right? The instructions that you get are pretty generic. There probably is a way to sort of better accomplish that so that you can have a more detailed welcome there, if you're going to reuse this code. So, so you've seen this and you're thinking, you know what, that would be great for us, right? We right now have an intern that's looking at Salesforce and rapidly typing over into the vendor portal, and sometimes mistakes are happening when we do that. Um, you'd love this automation. So right now, this is just, some sample code that I've written. So ping me. We can hang out in a Zoom and see what this would look like for your organization, right? It would help if you bring some folks involved in your Salesforce implementation, so that we can all talk together about what this would look like. And then, what else might happen here? Would you want to see this as something we supported in our product, and what would that look like, right? Grant and I were speculating a little bit about, maybe if we did this, you wouldn't have an editable license in the vendor portal, for example. That'd be a good way to remind folks that, hey, we want to keep these two things in sync. But there could be, other things that would make sense if this were product, and not just some sample code that I share with folks. So let us know. We can connect you with the product manager to have a conversation around that. And then resources for you. The docs, main docs that are interesting for this implementation are the vendor portal API. That's how this all happens, creating customers, accessing information about the license and the channel and the install instructions. All of that's going through the vendor portal API. There's a repository here. This is my code. It has my earlier demo video as well as a description of the code itself. And how to work with it. Again, if you follow these instructions directly, please, 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 please use a developer account, because I don't want my sample data, or more importantly, my cleanup of the sample data, messing with your real Salesforce. And then bring this back up to full screen. And then you will want that developer account so that you can play with this, and you can just get that from Salesforce. They've got a sign up page for developer accounts. So, Grant, that's what I got. Back to you.